Welcome, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with our 911 State 911 Advisory Board meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin doing roll call. Chief Bryan.
Here.
Sheriff Bonner. Chief Chappelle.
Chief Chappelle.
Is yours working too? Okay. Lisa Hoffman.
Here.
Chief Spiegel.
Here.
Leslie Wilson.
Here.
And Chip Yarborough.
Charlie Cullen representing Chip Yarborough.
And I'd also like to note that Chris Henshaw and Chief Nicolini have resigned from the board. At this time, we do not have a quorum, and I understand that there is, we might have a quorum.
Tastefully late.
I will call Sheriff Bonner one more time.
Chris Herron here for Sheriff Bonner.
Thank you. We now have a quorum. So the meeting now comes to order, and we're going to begin this meeting with our closed session. We'll be addressing the closed session pursuant to Government Code, Section 11126.18, subsection C, of the detailed information on outages. Do I have a motion for the closed session?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried to go ahead and go forward with our closed session at this time. I'd like the public to leave the room for about 10 to 15 minutes during the closed session. We'll carry that the minutes will go forward as written. We move on now to unfinished business. The first item is the State 911 Advisory Board meeting locations, northern and southern. And I will report, as I've been reporting in the last several meetings, the meetings will continue to reside in Sacramento due to our budget limitations and the amount of staff that I need to actually put these meetings on. So they will stay in Sacramento. So
Mrs.
there
Long,
is no change.
Before we move off of that one, Peter Bryan, speaking on behalf of the LRPC, I think certainly we've been able to make some significant progress in work, and I think a lot of that is by having a fixed location that certainly is adjacent to the office and the staff, especially with the travel policy. So from the LRPC, as long as we're making progress, I think we support having it locally. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the good comments, too. The next item of unfinished business is impacting technologies on the PSAPs. At our last board meeting, we wanted to have this as a standing item on our agenda, so it would give an opportunity for the board members to address any new technologies that they may have become aware of, and we can start working on those issues if they are issues or if they are actually something that we would support. So does the board have any information on any new technologies that may be impacting PSAPs?
I apologize, but did not bring the specific information, but in one of those becoming more frequent sleepless nights, there is now a service that's similar to the OnStar that people can subscribe to for a kind of like I've fallen and can't get up help that is supposed to connect with 911 services at a very, very significantly low monthly rate. I will do my best to research it and get it to your office, but I'm sure that it is another example that is outside of the realm of our CETNA funding, and is something that we're going to have to put into the packet as we work probably with Congress to get this back before the FCC and get some changes and things, because between all of these other services that are coming on board, it's certainly going to impact the centers.
There's a new technology coming. They're testing 911 tracker. It is a device that will be put into vehicles, and it tracks if the vehicle was stolen. So if the ignition is switched on without a key, it will then send a call to the owner of the vehicle, and the owner of the vehicle then has the ability to connect to 911. However, the number that is delivered to 911 is the number of the device in the car, which is not able to accept a return phone call. So if the call comes in to 911 and is disconnected for any reason, we wouldn't be able to call that person back. So that is a new technology that is out there should your office want to get involved.
And 911 trackers, that like.
That's what the name, they're calling the name of the device.
Were there any others?
Mrs. Wong, Peter Bryan, I don't remember if we discussed this. This is out of Friday, July 13th, so it would have been after our June meeting at USA Today. And the article just says, Smart 911 comes to nation's capital. The latest city to adopt Smart 911 system, an online emergency database where people can enter personal information such as medical conditions, et cetera. I don't have anything further than what USA Today was collecting, and I guess I'm wondering, okay, as these systems compile some form of information database, something to keep in mind as we look at next gen and what those fields or that information is that the system wants to certainly permit through to the PSAPs. But certainly, I think there's probably some information out there that emergency responders would like to have, but there may be a ton of information that these privates are going to be collecting. And whether somebody wants to give it to them or not, I guess is their business, but some of that I think we track and figure out what is that information they're collecting that might actually help us as we're responding or et cetera. So I found that one interesting. That was Friday, July 13 from USA Today.
It's important to remember with these devices that they're either charging the PSAP or they're charging the person. The public doesn't know that every PSAP is not subscribing to it. Oftentimes, these new technologies are wanting us to use a separate database, a separate computer. Many PSAPs don't have real estate for an additional computer at their workstations. To ask our dispatchers to go to another location to find information is cumbersome. It's an additional function. It's important with these new technologies that we try to see if that information can be delivered via the 911 network so that we're not adding additional functions and job duties. Smart 911 was one where they advertised that we would call their loved ones and advise that their person was in an accident or hurt or in a crime. It's just important that you look into what they're actually doing and that we're not adding additional functions to our dispatchers.
Well, on top of that, the Smart 911, I've looked into it, there's some cost to it and the impact to the centers. The Smart 911 is accessible to the public, and it's dependent on them putting the information in and keeping that information up to date. But there are a lot of applications out there, and there's a lot of third-party call centers answering for these calls, and all of these things need to be looked at because they're going to impact the dispatch centers who control the resources that are responding. That's the key point right there, is they're advertising these as 911 applications and confusing the public potentially that it is going to the 911 center that actually controls those resources that are responding to them. And the more that we have out there in these third-party vendors, the more difficult it's going to be to have effective response and call processing.
And Lisa Hoffman, I just want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. I mean, there are a lot of third-party applications that are very good, and I think Smart 911 is one of those. They do manage their product very well. It's cost prohibitive because it's per terminal. You have to pay for it. For me, it's cost prohibitive. But I've been researching a lot of applications that are coming across through Droid, through iPhone, and these applications are of course, labeled as 911, which everybody in the public knows that 911 is paid for out of a tax off your phone, or if they don't, they probably should. But these third-party vendors do cost to, you have to pay for the application for your phone, and then we have to figure out how it's going to be managed, because a lot of them go through a third-party vendor who then makes the phone call to 911, and so it really defeats the purpose. So I've been looking at a couple of these, and some of the ones that are the most concerning are the ones where they send out, a broadcast message to people who've signed up to participate, say, in CPR. We have no way of vetting whether or not that person has an actual CPR certificate, whether it's up to date. There are a lot of bad actors out there who may sign up for a program to get a page when somebody's having a heart attack, run up, steal their purse. We don't know what that's going to be, but it's going to all come back on 911. I think we're going to be the ones that are ultimately responsible, because it's going to say it's under the banner of 911.
This is Charlie Cullen with NENA, and I agree. I think there's a couple of important points about these applications. One is, does the technology interfere with the 911 open? And in that case, it clearly shouldn't be part of the network, and that may be the one area that the state 911 office could control. In an open marketplace, there's tons of these applications out there, and I don't think the state 911 would have a role in vetting every one of those. That's probably more appropriately done by the national organizations like APCO and National NENA that do provide standards. The second thing is, does the application or technology interfere with the dispatcher's work or ask them to do something in addition to what they would do normally for the public? And that, I think that an application that does that is not a good one. There may be some that have a role in the 911 system, but certainly something where you have to look at a separate computer or perform some function or notification that you wouldn't do on a regular 911 call. That's a problem. And the third thing is their liability for the agency once you take on one of these applications, because you're now providing a higher level of service, and if you fail to do that, is there an implication for the agency?
These are all really, really important points. And I hate to do this because I know that the Long Range Planning Committee has an awful lot on their plate, but is this something that we could punt over to the Long Range Planning Committee, not necessarily to vet each product? I really agree with what Charlie was saying, that we have national organizations out there that are paying attention to the new applications that are being considered for 911 as they're being actually deployed sometimes. But we would need the representatives to be working with, like National NENA and APCO, that we can actually start looking if these are something that we can consider, if we need to, be messaging our PSAPs. So is that something that the Long Range Planning Committee could take a look at, or should we, ask the different associations? I'm just kind of throwing it out there for some discussion.
Let me offer an attempt at reframing it for the Long Range Planning Committee. I think ideally, first off, because they're doing the lion's share of the work, and it's in those of us that are not participating in that appreciate that work. I think that what would be most instructive is if Long Range Planning could put together some sort of a matrix that identifies by category the types of technologies that are coming on, maybe not brand specific, and whether or not those are being vetted by NENA or by a national organization or by the FCC, and then identify those types of technologies that don't, or technologies that the state would have the authority to place guidelines upon, so that we as a body could then do the support work that the office needs, whether that be sponsoring legislation federally or a state level to do that, or to provide input back to the national organizations such as NENA to say, here's the input from California regarding this. So rather than, as you suggested, drilling down to the individual specific ones, trying to look at them in some form of category, who's doing what on them and what we can do to impact those.
Mrs. Wong speaking for the LRPC. This is Peter Bryan. I think certainly the members of the LRPC would be interested. I think certainly that falls in line with long range, and certainly as we're looking at the next-gen roadmap. So if that's the direction of the board, I'm certain that the LRPC would like to look at that.
And I do really like Chief Spiegel's comments that instead of drilling down on each individual item, but maybe categorize them. So that could be something that can be considered as well. So I think I'm looking for a motion if we would like to turn this issue. We'll continue to keep it on our unfinished business as an open item, but I guess I'd be looking for a motion if this is something that the board would want the Long-Range Planning Committee to start looking into and develop a framework on the best way to proceed forward.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Our next agenda item are our reports, and the first report will be on the California 911 Division update. Ryan Doolin.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Next series of updates on items of interest to the board and on activities of the California 911 Emergency Communications Division. A tracking document labeled handout number 2 is provided in your packet. The handout captures all the requests as a result of this previous State 911 Advisory Board meetings, and we've updated that with its current status. I won't go through each one of the items. If you have questions on a specific item, be happy to answer that. Handout number 3 is provided in your packet regarding PSAPs taking wireless 911 calls. As discussed at our last 911 Advisory Board meeting in June, there were 20 PSAPs not currently taking their wireless 911 calls. As of last week, I'm happy to report that Hemet PD Police Department has accepted to begin taking their 911 wireless calls. I wanted to personally thank Chief Peter Bryan for kind of initiating that communications with the PD and Hemet, City of Hemet. We now have 18 PSAPs on the list that still need to deploy. Auburn, at our last advisory board meeting, also accepted their 911 wireless calls, and we're working with that PSAP to deploy. I've been in contact with Leslie Wilson, who's a member of our board, who's working with a couple of CSUs in Southern California to get a current status and the reason for them not taking their wireless calls. So I wanted to also personally thank Ms. Wilson on that. And I continue to ask for each board member's assistance to reach out to your constituents to get the remaining PSAPs to adopt or accept their wireless 911 calls. The office is here for support and have provided data to assist in those conversations. So just need you to reach out to the office, and we'll be happy to provide you with projections or any information to help in those discussions. It is the office's goal to have 100% deployment, or at least know the reason why the PSAP, if it doesn't make sense, as Ms. Hoffman brought up, in some areas it doesn't make sense for the wireless 911 calls to be diverted to another PSAP if it's working well and both of the jurisdictions have accepted that. But it's our goal to deploy by the end of December and have 100% compliance statewide. So I appreciate your help on getting there. Any questions with respect to deploying or accepting wireless 911 calls?
Just one comment for you. We, at the Placer County Sheriff's Office, we reached out to Sierra County. I think we're closest to them, but we didn't hear back.
Okay.
Offered our assistance, offered to relay or, help coordinate with you, so just for
Okay.
your note.
I had a similar response from Atherton, but I will try again.
CHP reached out to Sacramento PD, and they've opened up some discussion. They've provided some mapping of areas that they're willing to consider, and CHP is pulling statistics to provide data to Sacramento PD.
Okay, appreciate that. And again, we want them to initiate acceptance of wireless. We're willing to negotiate timeframes, and if they just want to do carrier by carrier. So there's a lot of flexibility that our office, in concert with the CHP, to get those calls routed to the right PSAP the first time. That's our goal. So, we just want to broach that conversation and have them start accepting even one wireless call so we can start moving that direction. So there's a lot of flexibility just when you're having that conversation, a lot of flexibility in deployment options.
And it was very helpful, Ryan, for that information to be able to speak to the agencies and provide that to them, because I don't think they seen that and to make
Right.
some, informative decisions on their part. And some of these agencies, it may not make sense to transfer them to their agency when it's 13 calls a year or whatever.
Right.
Brian, I
Yeah,
have a question.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Lisa Hoffman. Have you used, for any of these agencies, have you used the RED project at all to determine, you have, and you've told them what the volume's going to be like? And because I know the response I get is always, oh, we can't handle all those calls. You're getting them anyway. You're just getting them in a circuitous route. And so I was trying to see if they understood that. And, I know I've had a couple of conversations, and I always get the same response. We can't we can't take those calls. And I keep telling them they're already getting them. And so I'm not really sure what more we can do other than, I think the RED project statistics are the best value marker that shows these are really your calls. They belong to your constituents, and you have a responsibility to your constituents to make sure that the call's getting routed correctly. And so I'm just not sure how you've used that to reach out to these agencies that still haven't even written their letter to start.
Yeah, we actually use the RED project, but as you know, there's a high turnover at the PSAPs with leadership, with chiefs or sergeants moving around. So I think a lot of it is communication and update them on the current information. So some folks may be aware of the project, RED project, maybe a year ago, but we have current stats. And just like Peter Bryan, he actually reached out to us. Jim Thompson from my office, I thought, did a really good job on getting the stats together, and also CHP helps us with that. And we provide current stats and projections on if you were to take your wireless calls, what would the call volume kind of be projected? And it's helped, I think, in them doing that analysis and understanding how those calls would impact their centers. So a lot of it is just, I think it's updated communication with the different players. It's seems to be folks are operating maybe on a year or two past information. And so a lot of the conversation, as long as you bring the folks up to speed and tell them, explain to them that they already are taking their wireless NIM calls, we will provide any current data that they want. And my office has made the commitment is that which is a key thing that most of the leadership has wanted, is if their call volume does increase and puts them in a different category from a funding perspective, our office will honor that. So we have made the commitment to reassess their call volume once the new calls go over.
And this is Leslie speaking. On the information that I got, it did identify the RED project results and the cell towers that were identified. So that was very helpful in talking to him, because in some of these cases, there were no cell towers identified, so it would be detrimental potentially to have the 13 calls sent to them, because they could get additional calls that didn't belong to them, and they would not be able to handle that call influx. So I think it is helpful, and the RED project information is being used.
Any other questions on that topic? Okay. So the next item is the California 911 Division will be establishing a statewide 911 education and awareness program. We're really excited about moving forward on this. It's one of Karen's big initiatives that we've worked on the last year. Ogilvy Public Relations in Sacramento was awarded the contract and is slated to be brought on in the next couple of weeks. All the materials and research data will be available to the PSAPs, and we'll be sharing with the board on any updates as we move forward on this contract.
And if you could explain a little bit of the scope of work and the analytics that we expect to get out of the contract.
So the analytics, one couple of the components of the contract is one, to establish a program that's sustainable by the office. The second one is to do research statewide on the demographics and the purpose of why people are using 911 or not using 911. The transition of the program from the contractor to the office to manage from an ongoing basis. And then we plan on having at least 2 pilot projects or campaigns, which they would construct the materials and collateral materials and campaign, whether it's a public service announcement or something like that. We plan to have 2 campaigns as part of this contract. So that's pretty much the scope of work at a high level. Any other questions on that topic? Okay, and the next item is the California 911 Division is currently working on a formal procurement for a new statewide foreign language emergency interpretation services contract, which was issued on July 6th of this year. The invitation for bid is posted out on BidSync currently. Final bids are due October 12th of this year, and we have extended the current contract until June of 2013 to ensure there's no interruption in the services for the PSAPs.
Lisa Hoffman, I have a question. Is it going to be the continued practice of the State 911 office to allow the PSAP to select the vendor?
Right. Current policy allows the PSAP to use multiple procurement vehicles. This is only renewing the state contract.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that item? Okay. Next on to the project updates. We have, as I've reported previously, we have 5 Next-Gen 911 pilot projects statewide, and I'll give an update on each one of those projects. The E91 grant project has Butte County Sheriff and CHP Chico live on the Next-Gen 911 network and currently routing on XY when it's available. So we have deployed that live. The rest of the PSAPs are being migrated throughout the month with the completion date of this month, September 30th, which is the grant performance period at the federal level. The California 911 Division will be working on lessons learned, a closeout report, and wrapping up any federal grant reporting activities through December 31st of this year. So from October 1st to December 31st, we'll be tying up all the loose ends and doing all the federal reporting on that grant. As I reported at the last board meeting, the California 911 Division is still awaiting sign-off on system acceptance by the PSAPs for the Imperial County project. They have a couple of items that they're working with the vendor to shore up. They deployed in September of 2011, so we're coming up almost on a year. We are in, constant conversation with the vendor on this to get system acceptance, so we're just waiting on the PSAP to have a comfort level on signing off on that. The Pasadena Ring project is working with AT&T on configurations, and the first PSAP is scheduled to go live on January of 2013. Ventura County project has cut over Simi Valley this month with Ventura County Sheriff and Oxnard scheduled for October. It also has an XY location-based routing component, and that is scheduled to go live in end-to-end testing in January of 2013. So we have a lot of these pilot projects coming to full implementation or ending the first part of January 13th. So we're really excited about that, and it's been a key focus of the office. And lastly, Mendocino County is working with the vendors on revised pricing to determine how they're going to move forward. They haven't decided a solution and also the cost wrapped around that. That concludes my updates, and are there any questions on that?
Ryan, just a quick question. Charlie Cullen with NENA. On the pilot projects, at the end of this, when they've all been signed off, are you going to come out with some kind of a best practices or approved architecture, or what's sort of the plan after the 7 projects have been completed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've actually tasked the staff, and we're currently working on a lessons learned or a closeout report. The federal government requires it on the E91 grant project, but we're actually going to apply that to all of our pilot projects, and we'll be sharing that with the board as well as the PSAPs as an outcome as they finish up. As each project completes, though, we'll probably at least need 90 days to complete those reports, just because of staffing and the time that it takes to put those together.
Thank you.
And that will involve a lessons learned. We're learning as projects go through, so we're not repeating the same mistakes or what's worked well. We're applying to the other projects.
And I guess my follow-up question would be, as PSAPs roll out new CPE equipment, will there be an approved, do you see this as a process for getting to what are the approved solutions that are out there, since there are a variety of them and potentially next-generation solutions?
Yeah, right now, a lot of the vendors, we're on the cusp of Next Generation 911. It's not mandated or funded currently, so we're doing our best. The only 5 pilot projects have been approved in the state of California. The Long Range Planning Committee is working on some criteria to expand that. I think Chief Spiegel had brought that up, is to develop that list of what we would evaluate any future next-gen projects in the state. And so we'll be using that list to kind of formulate if we need more projects. Text to 911 is one of the nationwide initiatives that the FCC is going to be doing a proposed rulemaking on, so we're kind of waiting on that. California is very interested in issuing a request for information on text to 911, also working with our deaf and disabled community, and so we're very interested in our state as well. So those are a couple of things that are going in the pipeline right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And one, I just wanted to follow up on, or close in one item. I think Lisa Hoffman had asked for a matrix or fact sheets on our next-gen pilot project, so we would have a list of vendors. Right now, the staff has put that together, but it's in review. We hope to have those posted to our website by October 1st. So I just wanted to give you an update on that. We are trying to get a fact sheet for each one of our pilot projects with some of the details, who the vendors are, and where their current status is. So we are working. I didn't want you to think that that fell off the radar.
No, I really thank you for that. I just want, I think a lot of agencies, myself included, are holding back on doing their upgrades because we're not sure what the future holds. I think everybody is like me. We don't want to move forward with a project only to find out that, there's something out on the horizon that would have been better for us.
Right.
And so we're not really sure what is going to be included in the CP and what isn't. And I think there's a lot of confusion about what next gen is going to be and what the expectation is. And we don't want to lock ourselves into, procuring a product and then having to wait 5 years to upgrade.
Yeah, we'll definitely have those out. Our plan is to get those posted by October 1st. Yep. All right, thank you,
Okay.
guys.
No other questions? Next on the agenda is the Long Range Planning Committee update with Chief Ryan.
Thank you. I'd like to begin by certainly thanking the participants in the office. We've been meeting regularly, as Chief Spiegel indicated, in between the board meetings, and that's taken some time, both as homework projects and digging through the materials. So for everybody that's participating in the office's support, thank you. There's 3 items on the agenda. The first one, the Long Range Planning Committee will be asking the board for action. And so the first one is the Long Range Planning Committee Charter. We approved that in final form yesterday at the committee meeting and are sending that on as attachment number 4 included in your packet today. Key element, or the key elements included are that it provides for 5 members, which is the maximum members on the committee based on the size of the 911 Advisory Board. We currently have 3 members that are assigned to the committee, and so that gives us a vacancy for 2 members. The charter provides for only 1 member from each one of the sponsoring, as I'll call them, agencies, and those are APCO, NENA, California Fire Chiefs, California Highway Patrol, California Police Chiefs, and California Sheriffs. So there are 6 organizations. 5 can be represented on the committee. We've also added a provision in the charter to request, without making it a mandate for the office to attend, that certainly the office provides support to the committee, but also gives us the ability to ask some questions and have some dialogue instead of just submitting material, and certainly that's been helpful. So the item before you for your consideration is the charter for the Long Range Planning Committee, and certainly I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if the board takes a positive or approval action on that, then we would certainly like to request that the board fill the 2 vacancies. And from the committee's perspective, we would like NENA to be one of those added member agencies. And that certainly leaves 1 position from the remaining 2 organizations, and certainly that can be at the desires and the wish of the board. So with that, that's the first item, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you. Lisa Hoffman, I think it's a very comprehensive approach. I think it's very well put together, and I want to thank you guys for doing the work.
Please just give us a couple more members is what the committee would like to say.
One of the questions that I would have is that before we take action on this, I'd like to have some more time for the board to read this. I think you've had this for probably less than a week, or maybe 2 weeks when this was announced. I think this is excellent work, and I've been very, very pleased with the work of the Long Range Planning Committee. And I think we're really moving forward as a group. And I also would like to possibly wait until we look at appointing the new members, because we have 3 vacancies now on the board. So maybe we could relook at this at our December meeting.
Peter Bryan speaking on behalf of the LRPC. Certainly, we'd be happy, as any of the participants that are here today, to answer any questions that the board would have. But we'd also like to entertain filling those vacancies based on the time it could take to make appointments to the board. Not that that would be a slow process, but certainly we've seen that that's not necessarily a speedy process. And in light of adding, let's just call it another task today to the LRPC, certainly we think that's important. We know that there is a stipulation that the LRPC makeup must be by a board member or a designee. That designee has to be the same designee as is the alternate to the board itself. So that certainly complicates. You can't just pick somebody else that either works with you or certainly represents that organization. So there's some encumbrances there that we're having to deal with. So I think the committee would like to say, we'll answer any questions, but we'd like to pressure you for some action unless you really feel, I got to sleep on this. And certainly the other participants, speak up if I'm wrong, so.
Chris Herron, no, I agree. Thanks, Peter. We have a lot on our plate, and I think we would like to have a couple more people helping out. I mean, that's really the bottom line.
Would it be acceptable to appoint members to the board and look at the charter and put it forward for approval in December? Appoint the members now?
I think that's a good compromise.
And offer in the alternative, I don't know how long it's got the resignations. Do you have, this is a little out of order, but do you have nominees for the replacements on the board yet?
I'm aware of resignations.
I understand the urgency of what you want to do, but I also think there needs to be an urgency in getting the board positions filled. So I'm wondering if there's a way to do this by action. And I always love testing the legal advice that you guys get because it's always interesting to hear. But can we, by action, make the appointment through conference call by the board? It doesn't say that the board, your recommended guidelines here, if approved today, doesn't say that we've got to do it in a meeting. It just says it'll be designated by the board. So we could do a conference call of the board once you know who the nominees are and appoint your people before December. I'm just concerned that you're back to the same pool that are here, on that. If you already know that you've got the ability to fill that and everybody's willing and ready to jump into that, certainly with the historic knowledge, we can go forward and do that. But the opportunity to bring some fresh blood and insight into it shouldn't be overlooked either. So I thought that might be a compromise in it if we can do it by conference call. Take the action to approve this now and direct staff to, as soon as the board appointees are notified, to have a conference call so that you can determine who's going to be on Long Range Planning Committee.
Chief Spiegel, Peter Bryan, to answer a couple of your questions, I think. There is interest from organizations to appoint to the LRPC, I believe at this time. I don't want to speak for the organizations, but certainly there are interested people. I think that pool is among the people sitting at the table today. I think that if a new board member is approved, I think it'll be a while before they find somebody, unless they are interested. I think it'll be a while before they find an alternate to appoint to the committee. Certainly, it is the committee's request that you include NENA in one of those two positions, and I think that we could fill that one certainly pretty close to immediately. But I think that that's imperative. We've got at least one, maybe two more meetings before our next board meeting. Certainly, I think the committee is supportive of looking at the charter, but certainly the committee is assertive in its nature that we'd like to fill the two vacancies as quickly as we could.
Do we have any other comments from the board? Do we have a motion on the table on where to go forward? I mean, we've had a lot of really good discussion and a lot of good comments, but I think you need a motion and approved motion to move forward with appointing these board members, the members for the LRPC.
I
the
don't
Long-Range
think
Planning
that,
Committee.
I'm sorry, Lisa Hoffman here, I'm still in the discussion phase. I don't think that the approving the recommendation from the Long Range Planning Committee for their, for the product that they've proposed is mutually exclusive from adding the board members. I, like Chief Spiegel, think that we could do a motion to approve. I'm not really sure if you can appoint without the conditions being met, or if those people are here that can meet the conditions of the appointment are here. Are they? They are? So
Well,
then-
I think the issue is there's only one NENA member who is still on the board because there's been a resignation. So that person would have to be nominated and approved by this group, and then they could set an alternate or make whatever decision they choose to make.
Okay.
Peter Bryan speaking. At this point in time, I'd like to motion that we appoint a NENA representative to the LRPC, since we do have a NENA member on the board.
Is there,
And, excuse me, I'm sorry, Mrs. Wong, and the LRPC is not represented currently by a NENA member.
is there a motion second?
Motion is second.
Is there further discussion, or,
Do we
All
need to,
in-
do we need to motion to approve this charter first?
Yeah, I think we need to motion that. I think it needs to be one motion, that we motion
Right.
for the approval of the charter, and that the motion that the NENA representative be added to the Long Range Planning Committee.
Peter Bryan speaking. I'll revise my motion to include that wording, please.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
On behalf of the LRPC, thank you, and certainly that means that we have, as I would take it from that action, we still have one vacancy on the LRPC, and certainly encourage any other board members to either be represented, because there's only two groups to choose from, or to find an alternate for your position on the board, and then certainly a recommendation to fill that position to the committee. And certainly that's a couple steps, but we certainly need the sponsoring organizations to determine that they'd like to be the member on the LRPC. So unless there's any other charter questions, certainly I'll move on to the next item. Mrs. Wong?
I just wanted to comment, we will be checking with our legal counsel on the ability to have a conference call regarding the subject. And we will let folks know what the outcome is for that.
And just a quick comment, if the state or other members of the board find any of the, any issues with the charter, we could certainly amend that charter in December, because I realize it's been sort of short notice for a number of people to review it.
Okay, moving on. Again, this is Peter Bryan. The next item was the Next Gen 911 funding guideline. And the committee has been working on funding, closure, and consolidation. And we're essentially taking that in a methodical process to look at the operations manual and combine that together. So we yesterday began reviewing Chapter 3 of the operations manual, which is on funding. We think that's the appropriate way to do that, and to also be able to tie in some of the strategic plan, next-gen roadmap items and tie those together. So we anticipate that Chapter 3, the funding, the closures, and consolidation will take us at least a few more, if not several more meetings to work on. There is not a handout in your packet today. It references handout number 5, but we've just begun working on that, and certainly it will be a while before we're ready to release anything. The Chapter 3 funding, as I recall, is somewhere around 30 pages, so certainly the LRPC would like to reach out to all the stakeholders, and certainly we'll be doing that as members of the LRPC as well, to seek any ideas that you have on funding, closures, consolidation, and the Chapter 3 of the operations manual. So certainly we welcome any input, and if there are any ideas, any thoughts, certainly we'd like to request people submit those to the office for the LRPC, and certainly we'll deal with those. So the second item is just an update dealing with where we are on the funding guideline and what we've wrapped into that.
And I'd like to make a request that NENA create a blast and ask for their membership to provide feedback.
And as the NENA representative, we can certainly accommodate that request.
And the third item that is on the agenda is draft goals and objectives roadmap. We discussed that yesterday, and as an update, we're recommending that we take the original strategic plan goals and objectives, the next-gen roadmap, and tie that into the presentations to the stakeholder organizations. Our discussion yesterday centered around our next committee meeting. The office will be revising the previously prepared and presented PowerPoint. We'll be going through that material and then preparing LRPC members to go out to the stakeholder groups, start meeting with them on as regular basis as we can to be able to get that information out, and certainly to let the stakeholders know where it is that we're going with long-range planning from the committee's perspective. And at this point in time, I guess I'd like to ask any of the other LRPC participants if there's anything that I missed in our update report or anything that we should have done as far as an action item.
Chris Aaron, just a comment. At the last board meeting, I gave the LRPC report and mentioned that we were going to have a couple of workshops before this meeting, and we were unable to hold those because of restrictions on Bagley Keene, correct? Just the state office can comment on that if they need to, but just so the board knows, we're unable to, the LRPC is unable to hold workshops in the with what we had in mind, which was having other members, maybe from CCTF, PSAP community, join us in sort of a conversation in a working meeting. So that restriction has kind of pushed some of these things back a little bit, I think.
This is Leslie. There's no way to, did you seek legal counsel on that, to have a workshop? I know local government does that with their city councils and has workshops on certain items.
Ryan's up here because he will be able to respond.
I hope. So basically on Bagley King, this is a committee, which is a subset of the actual board. It is a public meeting that needs to be posted. The conversation has to be between the members on the committee. So, you know, if the board, that's the restrictions as Bagley King. So it's just an extension of the board right now. We had 3 members. The public can participate, but under public comment, it's not a dialogue as back and forth. My understanding with like County Board of Supervisors and City Council, they have these kind of forums, but they're operating under different, I think the Brown Act and so forth, which is different than the Bagley-King that the state offices have to operate under. We can reach out to our legal counsel if there's another forum that has to be created instead of the LRPC, but currently that entity, it makes it very difficult for a dialogue to happen in that forum. If there's another type of forum that can be created or not so formal, we can seek legal counsel on that. That's not a problem, but under the current rules for Bagley-King, the LRPC can't engage in that dialogue.
Ryan, would one possible solution be to have an extended public comment period? But the way I understand it, the board couldn't respond to anything from the public, although they could discuss it amongst themselves during the meeting. Is that
That's
correct?
the issue, is that my understanding is that the LRPC wanted a exchange and dialogue if there was public comment, questions, and more conversational, as opposed to they can ask questions. I'm not a legal counsel, so just to let you know that I think they can clarify a question, but they can't have a dialogue back and forth.
And
But we can, go ahead.
We can seek legal counsel
That's right.
assistance to see what we can do
Right.
under Bagley-King and get some guidance on if there's any way that we can have workshops, and if we do, what would the parameters be?
When we did the workshops at the CPUC, those were public and they were open and they were workshops. How did they manage around that?
There's no, not more than 2 board members present.
Oh, okay. And then the other question I had was, is there a way that you can have people submit questions in advance that the board can review and then respond to publicly after, in private session, and then respond to publicly?
We can seek legal advice on that and see if that's a possibility.
Thank you.
I think the issue is just the dialogue. So now that we know what the intention of the LRPC, we also thought that we could go forward. And so now that we know the intention, what the LRPC is trying to do, and that dialogue is needed to bite off some of these action items, and we'll seek legal counsel on that. That's not a problem.
We'll find out what the parameters are in which to have a workshop.
Yep. We definitely are supportive, and we think it's a good thing.
Anytime that we can engage more of our stakeholders always provides us a better product in the end.
I have one last question. So if there are only 2 members of the board present, then it could be an open dialogue where they take that information back to the LRPC group?
That's what I want to go back with the board, with our legal counsel, because the public meetings, what we did is we took all that dialogue and published a report. So let us go back and talk with legal and see how we can help the LRPC in order to have some workshops.
In that dialogue, I think there's a unique distinction in participation, attendance, and a private person's right to attend. So I'm hoping that council will also speak to the fact that you may only have 2 long-range planning members participate in the meeting. But as long as a planning member is sitting and observing in the meeting and not participating in the conversation and the dialogue or opining, it would be good to get legal counsel's view of that, because the Keene Act was intended to avert things being done, but I don't think it was to avert those things that should not occur, but not to stifle or stovepipe communication. And I think there are some ways, if there is a will to find a way to get more dialogue going and seek more public input. That's what our whole process is supposed to be about, not restrictive.
Agree. We'll work and see what we can do, because we totally support the workshops. Anything else?
Unless there's anything else from the committee members, and certainly, Mr. Herron, thank you for bringing that up, because we still want to have workshops. We certainly want to at least have a very effective dialogue as we work through some of these items. So right now, it's submit your thoughts, ideas, questions, complaints, et cetera, to the office, and the LRPC will then have something to work with in addition until we can do better, other than there is public comment, and the LRPC invites public comment at the beginning and the end of the meeting, and sometimes we get some of that, sometimes we don't, but certainly that's the best we can do, at least at this point in time. Thank you again to the participants and members of the committee.
Thank you very much. The next board item is the state emergency telephone number account, our SETNA account, and we have handout, looking for the right number, 7 and 8. And I'd like to walk through both of these handouts. First, handout number 7 is the fund condition statement that we have submitted to the board prior. So I think everyone's aware of this, and please note at the very bottom we show a $1 million reserve. Handout number 8, I'd like to walk through some of the facts that we have gathered for this particular document. The first matrix up at the top shows actual and estimated surcharge revenue. In 2009-10, it was roughly an actual of $90 million worth of revenue. 2010-11, our actual revenue was roughly $86 million. Fiscal year 2011-12, revenue was $83 million. Our projected revenue for 2012-13 is $80 million. And our projected revenue in 2013-14 is $78 million. The fund condition statement that you've received prior showed our projected savings in our SETNA fund for 2012-13 at $1 million. At the end of last week, we did receive new information from the Department of Finance and the Board of Equalization, and our fund balance now for the projected for 2012-13, our savings, our balance reserve, thank you, Charlie, will be roughly $36 million. At this time, with the $36 million, we do not feel it's prudent to be going to the Board of Equalization and requesting an increase in the surcharge. We have been exploring options, policy changes in the office, and we will be submitting those policy change, proposed policy changes to the board at our December meeting. We are also looking at some statutory changes because we really have a structure problem with our SETNA account that we need to address. So does anyone have any questions or comments?
Lisa Hoffman, I have a couple of questions and a comment. On the first document, it's listed at the bottom that the dollars are in thousands. So is that a typographical error? You have reported that it was in millions, but it's indicating in thousands on the handout 7.
I'm going to have Ryan respond. This is $1 million. I'm not sure where the confusion is with the dollars and thousands.
That is actually an error, a typo. So it is in 2010-11 would be 61 million. In 11-12, the balance would be 15 million. And the last one is 1,000. I think when they say dollars in thousands, they're taking 1,000 times 1,000, which would be $1 million. And that's how Department of Finance, this is a formal document that's in the governor's budget, and that's how they report it. We report on our document just for clarity and say that it's reported in millions. But if you do the translation, both are accurate from a accounting method. So it's just how you actually would use the terminology.
So I'm confused then. How is it that your department has a different, significantly different projection than the official Department of Finance projection?
Okay. Last year, this was the projection. We have closed the books on our spending for the SETNA fund at the end of fiscal year 11-12, and so we're moving forward. There is a reserve balance of $36 million as we move forward. based on our projected spend.
And that's the difference between projected and actual. When I look at 2011, 2012, where there's about a $35 million difference. And so that will carry us over to the following year.
Yes, and the following year, we can relook at going forward with an increase to the set surcharge if necessary.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the state office for doing the work to come up with some additional funding. Clearly, it's a relief to us and the PSAPs. My one concern is that are we just postponing the inevitable and have to deal with this issue again next year? And I realize you just received this information in the last 10 days, so it would not be feasible for you to come up with a fund condition statement based on the new information. But certainly that's something I think we would all like to see at the next meeting, possibly with a projection for 2013, 2014, because with ever declining revenues, and I think we balanced the books this year using a $28 million loan repayment, which really helped the Setna Fund, where we may well be looking at a deficit again next year. And in fact, from all the numbers I've seen, it's quite possible. The $35 million difference between projected and spent kind of saved us this year, and we have a considerable reserve. So hopefully moving forward with the new formula or the new model, we can continue to be fiscally solvent with a reasonable reserve.
And thanks, Charlie, I appreciate that. And because we don't have the official fund condition statement, we did not want to wait until that was out to present this to the board. We wanted to give you the information that we had in the office.
And Lisa Hoffman, I just want to, I'm just a little, to me, it's a stark contrast from 2009-10 to the projection of 13-14. We're down like a significant projection for what the fund's going to look like.
Correct.
So I'm just curious, there's no, if we're looking forward, we know everything's costing more, we know there's going to be a lot more expenditures, we know everybody needs to migrate to next generation at some point. I just think it would be more productive to seriously consider raising the fund this year rather than waiting and being trailing behind if we have to raise it again next year.
Right, and right now, it's just not prudent with a $36 million reserve to go forward with a fund increase. Correct, but it's based on good projections that have historically held true. Our spend has been pretty consistent through the years.
And I can certainly understand that, given the economic climate and the fiscal situation for the state as a whole, it would be hard to go forward and ask for additional money if you have a reserve. But I think that looking at the following year early and getting in front of that to see what our anticipated shortfall is, so that we can make a strong case to advocate for a increase next year if we need to, would be a sound strategy.
And that's why we will be presenting to the board next December, well, this coming December, sorry, some proposed policy changes that we can see that could possibly help the balance, as well as really look at some statutory changes we need to make. When we look at the landlines, they are decreasing. It's a fact. They're decreasing. Cell phones are becoming more prevalent as a form of communication. The way cell phones and landlines are billed help reduce. Landlines are billed based on intrastate minute usage. Cell phones are billed on a bundled flat rate. So we really need to look at the structure of the Setna Fund and look for some statutory changes.
I think additionally, $36 million kind of has a headline similar to a $54 million one that hit the paper not too long ago, although this one hasn't been hidden anywhere.
Absolutely not.
But to that end, if you're going to move forward with, saying this is a needed reserve to hold over, because in December we need to know what those projected costs are going to be for transitioning to Next Gen 911. We have to have that at that time when this number becomes official to appropriately be able to designate these funds moving into the next budget year and say, these are the things that are happening over the next 5 years as systems start transitioning to it. This is the increase in cost. Here's the downward trend on the Setna Fund revenue because of decreased landlines and the difference in the billing rates. And then these are the things that we're recommending legislatively to address those and to adopt as policies to ensure that we can still sustain a quality 911 system.
And we do look toward the board if there's any advice that you could provide us as we get closer to our December meeting that you would like to have brought up as well at the meeting. I would really appreciate that. And we did provide at our last meeting our draft report on the Setna Fund from R.L. Kimball. So I'm assuming you guys were all okay with that, with no comment. So that kind of gives us a place to start as well. But we would really be reaching out to the board right now to provide some assistance.
I do have a line item question, and it may be that I've forgotten about it just because it's a mental block, but I keep seeing a continuing appropriation to the Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, and it's increased significantly in 12, 13. What is this?
I don't have that information with me today. I'm just going to call CAL FIRE, the Department of Forestry and Fire Services did go through the proper budget channels to increase this rate.
All right, well, I have a request, and I'll put it in the form of a motion. I would like to request the board to put an agenda item on for December for a discussion of the expenditures through CAL FIRE. This process has been repeatedly used. The budget proposal process has been used. I know that's a sensitive issue because you are a state agency. What comes through Department of Finance and everything else, if you have to march to orders, you have to march to orders. But this is a sideline effort to take away the authorities and the responsibilities of the Setna funding and fund communications in another department in the state. It's not appropriate for this to occur, at least without the opportunity for public vetting of it. It's occurred year after year. It started out with dispatch funding for secondary PSAPs that turned out to be training positions, and now we don't even know what it is, and it's jumped from 2010 budget of 2.6 million to 8.8 million in this last year without a blip. We're sitting here concerned about how we're going to keep the first line PSAPs current and with current technology, and without an explanation of how and why that gets there, I don't think it's appropriate. Make the motion that the item be placed for discussion and some sort of action on the next agenda.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, wait.
Discussion.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Peter, discussion?
Mrs. Wong, can you comment on the fiscal numbers? Does the projected 2012-13 fund balance include the transfer of that money that was just mentioned? And does it also include closing out some or all of the projects that Mr. Doolin mentioned and reported on earlier? So is that included in that fund balance?
Yes.
So it's projects and the transfer of funds?
It would be the RED project, the Routing on Empirical Data project.
Point of order. It's got nothing to do with the motion regarding CAL FIRE. Could we just take the vote on the CAL FIRE and then proceed with questions on the budget?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Back to your question.
Mrs. Wong, you mentioned the RED project. Ryan also reported on several other pilot projects. So I guess my question is you indicated that the 12-13 projected fund balance does include the transfer to CAL FIRE. Does it also include closing out some or all of those projects, pilot projects?
It includes closing out our Routing on Empirical Data project because that project has ended. The pilot projects, they will not be technically completed until our report is done. And so they will be closing out all the way throughout this year. So they are included in this 36 as still open projects. So
So it doesn't
Of
include the
answering-
final projected closeout?
no, this does
Those
not.
projects could reduce this projected fund balance
Those
lower?
projects could increase the projected fund balance if they're closed out sooner, and those costs will no longer be spent. So this does not include closing out any other project other than the routing on empirical data. So if projects are closed out sooner, this projected reserve would increase.
Providing, of course, that the projects are within budget, et cetera.
Correct.
And you're anticipating that. So essentially, those pilot projects, which we are excited to see, and certainly want to see the reports at the end of those, when they're completed, you're saying that most likely fund balance will be the same as projected or will increase? Could increase?
Could potentially increase. I'm not going to say I think it will. But the fact that whenever a project closes out similar to the red, we no longer expend those funds.
And I guess the reason I ask those questions is at our June meeting, we had a motion and approval for the board that it recommended raising the fund surcharge. So I wanted to look at those pilot projects. Certainly from the long-range planning committee's perspective, we're looking at the desired likelihood of more pilot projects as quickly as certainly either technology or as those projects are closed out so that we know what technology is really working. And I guess my concern would be is, will the fund balance be able to support in the 13-14 year additional pilot projects on the same scope or intensity, not knowing where those are going?
And before I could answer that, we would have to put our projections of what we would be spending for pilot projects for 13-14 in order to answer that question, and we have not done that yet for 13-14.
Let me ask you, with the pilot projects that are underway now, will the projected fund balance be sufficient to fund the same fiscal level of pilot projects if we wanted to continue in 13-14?
Yes.
And then I had a question that you may not be able to answer since you don't have detailed information on the fund condition. But is there any anecdotal information on where that additional $35 million came from? Was there less money spent on CPE equipment? Were there reduced network costs? Do we know?
We do have some information. One of the items where we did see some reduction in cost is that our 911 division worked with the carriers to clean up our database and decrease the number of express dial tone and quick dial tone accounts. So we were able to decrease that part of the spend. In addition, our contract for the CPE equipment did not go in effect until February.
So that delayed some implementations
Yes.
and consequently less capital expenditure?
Correct.
Thank you.
But would that come back then next year with a full year?
Not that we're expecting right now based on our interaction with the PSAPs.
Thank you.
Chris Herron, Karen, is it possible for the office to put together for our next meeting a list of those agencies who are on month-to-month maintenance? So in other words, who are deferring, who are up for their renewal, but are deferring? Because I think that's important. I think what you're speaking to is that's why we're saving money. And I think there are a lot of PSAPs out there who are waiting to see what's going to happen with next gen.
I'm looking at Ryan. Let me go, it's
Or,
okay.
well, that's a request, so see if
Yeah, let
that's
us go back
something
and see if
that's-
we can put that together by the next meeting. I think that would be very good data to have.
Right.
And Karen, even if it's not, I don't think we necessarily need a list of the names of the PSAPs, just a rough idea of the number would probably be helpful.
Yes.
Good point. A dollar amount is more important than the list
So
of PSAPs.
we can definitely look at that. I just, right now, without knowing what the data we have in the office, I don't want to overpromise. But let us definitely attempt to get that information to you, and if we can't, at least explain to you what we can give you.
And I guess the bottom line question is, do you anticipate a large increase in CPE procurement since there was that delay in the CPE contract being released this past year. Do you think there is a backlog of requests out there, or what does the 911 office think at this time?
Based on our interaction with the PSAPs, we do not see an increase for this fiscal year
Thank you.
than what we've already projected. Is there any further questions?
Long, Peter Bryan speaking. I guess I'm wondering now if the board needs to take some action to, I'll use the word, rescind its approved action from last meeting dealing with the surcharge. I don't know if that's a legal question or procedural question. I don't know if we need to do anything or just let it stand.
I believe we can let it stand. It was advice that the board provided us in June. We now have more information, and so I believe it's more procedural and we can just move forward. If there's no further questions, we're going to move to the next item on the agenda, which is our County Coordinator Task Force. And if we could have the County Coordinator Task Force Chair join us.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Vaughn. I am servicing as the chairperson for the County Coordinator Task Force. And I have two members with me today I'd like to introduce to the board. We have Tracy Kessler, who is the Dispatch Services Manager with Placer County, and she's on the task force. And we also have Wes Nita, who's with the California 911 Division, and he's a supervising telecom engineer. My title, I'm with the Sonoma County Sheriff's Office, and I am a dispatch supervisor. So what we wanted to do today was give you all an update of what's going on with the task force. We are active. We have had our first meeting as of last week. We've started brainstorming some projects that we could be working on and where we can add value. We also met with Ryan. I met with Ryan on last Friday and gave him an idea of where we were at and where we wanted to go, and he also gave us some feedback. So we are working actively right now on establishing a list that we will run by the California 911 Division and prioritize and establish duties and tasks as we move forward. We are actively recruiting for the additional 3 members of the County Coordinator Task Force. And in our meeting last week, we discussed some of the options that we could take to try to get more county coordinators on board. And one of the first things we're going to do is we've written a letter that we're going to circulate, trying to give them an idea of some of these things we want to work on to elicit some interest, some excitement about working on the task force. So we'll be putting that out here shortly. And then we're also going to do some outreach, individual outreach. The 3 county coordinators on the board will be reaching out to individuals they know who are county coordinators who might be interested and good fit. I neglected to mention we do have a 3rd county coordinator on the task force, and that's Delia Kraft with Orange County. She could not be here today, but she's planning on attending the December meeting so she can introduce herself. And if we have any additional applicants, hopefully we'll be moving forward then. Some of the ideas that we've started bouncing around that we could be working on in the short term. So we're kind of looking at 6 months, what can we get done? And then in a year, what can we be looking at providing? And one of the suggestions that Ryan Doolin had made to us is maybe we could help with some of the wireless acceptance that you just spoke about in the PSAPs. We're also going to be looking at providing input on technical standards on things such as MLTS. And we will be reaching out to our county coordinator colleagues when necessary to get their input on those types of standards and issues. As you spoke to earlier as well, all the new applications and technology and things, some things are impacting PSAPs now. And so I think the county coordinators are a great resource for what is coming in there. And we are already, that is an active agenda item on the county coordinator conference call we have monthly. So we will be staying on top of that and trying to provide that information as well. One of the other items we're going to be looking at trying to do in the short term is taking the county coordinator manual that the last task force put together and did such a great job with putting together a lot of resources for new county coordinators as well as current county coordinators. And we're going to finalize that and then submit it for official adoption by the state as a document. We're also looking at the Operations Manual, Chapter 8, the County Coordinator section of that, to see if there are any duties that need to be changed or added, especially as we move into next gen. Some of the county coordinator duties could change, and so we're going to try to come up with a way to capture that in the manual so that we don't have to constantly update the manual as we move forward. And one of our big items we talked about last week is how are we going to communicate? One of the things I see the County Coordinator Task Force as being is a real conduit of information, both information coming up from the county coordinators to boards such as yourself or the Long Range Planning Committee, the California 911 Division, but also taking, if we're planning on having a member attend the 911 Advisory Board and the Long Range Planning Committee, so we will be fully versed on what you're working on and can put that information out so that our coordinators can also provide their stakeholders with what is going on at this level, because not everyone has time to sit through the whole meeting. So what we're looking at doing is resurrecting the coordinator website that the last county coordinator task force had put together. We all unanimously agreed that that was an excellent resource. And so we are going to establish a library link on that website where we can put documents, and we've spoken to Ryan about possibly videotaping certain presentations that are done at the coordinator forum so that we would have a long-term resource for someone who's new or just couldn't attend that training. We're also going to continue with the county coordinator forums twice a year. We will be doing the monthly conference calls, and Ella Satella has agreed to continue to chair those, and we will have a portion of that where we will update the county coordinators on the conference call as to what we're working on, the task force, and take any information they would like us to carry up the chain. We'll be doing some webinars. And then one other item is we've asked if we can both contribute content ideas for the California 911 Division newsletter, and then maybe have a section dedicated to the coordinators and the task force. We will be contributing something there. So that's kind of where we're at. Just wanted to give you an update, and if anyone has any questions for us, we're pleased to answer them.
Any questions from the board?
No, just thank you for stepping up and taking those positions.
I also wanted to add, it's a very ambitious plan that you have put together, and I admire you for taking this on. Thank you.
We're very excited about it. People who are very passionate, so thank you.
And I think you made a good point about the county coordinators are kind of where the rubber meets the road, and you're seeing a lot of these applications that we may not be aware of or other issues with 911, and that it would be very beneficial for us if you pass those on to both the Long Range Planning Commission and the committee, and the 911 Advisory Board. Because you're the ones out in the field who see what is happening, and we may not always be aware of it. We try to be, but there's a lot less of us. I think there's 52 county coordinators, if I'm not mistaken, so you could be a real resource for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the other piece of that we have talked about, run by the state office, is the public education piece, that the state is coming out with a program here, and how can the county coordinators provide input both into that program and take the information that program provides and pushes it out, because there's two pieces of these apps. You know, we can't identify every app, but we can certainly let the public know this is real 911 and this is something else. So
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
And thank you very much, and we really do appreciate you stepping up and taking these roles, and the county coordinator does play an important part in the 911 community, so thank you for being part of the task force.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move on to new business. At the last board meeting, we wanted to have a discussion with the advisory board on green solutions. As we all look around, we have piles of paper in front of us. So would you guys like to discuss on ways that we can maybe reduce the paper that the 911 office provides prior to these meetings, if there's any alternatives that we could be doing to keep our trees in California, and other green solutions?
I have a question. You know, I mean, I don't have a problem with bringing my laptop and uploading it and reading it off my laptop, which I planned to do today, but I had a little technical difficulty. But, so I was trying to do it on my phone, and it was giving me a headache. So I do understand. Do you have to provide a certain number of handouts for the public as well, or is it something you could project, or are you required to produce that?
You know, let me go back and check through our process through Bagley Keene, because we are required to provide the public with all the handouts. But if there's an alternative that we could project our handouts and then allow people to download them off of the website. So let's go, we'll definitely take that back and go see what we can do. And projection, I didn't even think about that at all. I think that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, I was just thinking that if you did project it and then at the bottom had the link that they could go to, they could write that down or whatever. That's one minor piece, one tree.
Well, we do make a lot of copies to make sure our public that do attend always get a handout, so we do make a lot of copies.
And I think using a laptop or a tablet would be I mean, I have 2 copies of everything here, and I have everything electronically would be a much better way to do it, and perhaps another monitor here where you could project the document for the public.
All of which I believe we can do. And I forgot that we did have these monitors in here, so we could actually project them for the board as we have one monitor and then one on the other side. So definitely, we'll look at both of those. And maybe what we can do is if board members do not want to bring their laptop, we would just provide the paper to the board members who choose or do not have a laptop.
And, you know, not to be too out there, but I think you can ask that in advance when you send out the announcement for the meeting. If somebody doesn't have a laptop or can't bring a laptop, to let you know, and you'll provide the paper copy.
Yep. We will go forward with that recommendation. Okay? So thank you very much. And if you have any other thoughts, please feel free to provide them to Ryan Doolin, and we will definitely consider those. And I think what I will do is just keep this, if you don't mind, at least for the next couple of meetings on the agenda as unfinished business as we proceed forward, if there's any other ideas that we can consider. Okay, and now the agenda items for future meetings. We have a CPUC presentation, a Cal EMA notification proposal, Information Security Officer from the California Technology Agency, Keith Trush, as a tentative speaker. And were there any other items that you would like to add to this, or any items you want to delete? Because we will start moving these forward on our December board meeting.
Karen, this is Leslie. Do we have a new GIS manager?
We do have a new GIS manager, and I would be more than glad to invite him to come out and speak.
Should we do that, please? Thank you.
I think one item we could add is establishing the schedule for 2013 at the December meeting, so we can all at least do some advanced planning. I know that things change, but it would certainly help to have those quarterly meetings mapped out in advance.
Thank you, because what I'd like to do, and we will have this on the agenda for December, is I'd like to have a consistent third Thursday of the month or something to that effect that we can all plan and we all know when the meeting will be coming up. We'll have some proposals on the agenda for December.
Long, Peter Bryan, and to follow up on that one, can we start for the December meeting And I know that we discussed this for LRPC yesterday for the upcoming committee meetings, but can we start from the board meeting on the doodle or whatever process to schedule that one?
We will start tomorrow. No other comments? We'll move to announcements. Are there any announcements? With no announcements, I move to
Oh,
public.
Karen, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Didn't CalNENA want to announce their meeting that's coming up?
Well, thank you, Lisa. Yes, the Cal NENA quarterly meeting is in Monterey on October the 25th, which is a Thursday, and we are meeting at, remind me again, Michelle, the location? Monterey Beach Resort. So October in Monterey is pretty nice. If you're so inclined, we'd love to see you there.
Any other announcements? Okay, we move forward now to public comment, and I'd just like to advise the public to keep the comments are limited to 3 minutes. Okay, with no public comment, this is the end of our agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
I'll move that we adjourn the meeting. Lisa
Second.
Hoffman.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.